Hey, everybody. Welcome to this month's episode of the Developers Digest. I'm joined today by a co host that you may have seen doing some other stuff on the Developer Advocate channel. It's Kevin Muessig. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, how's it going?
Going very well. A little hot here in our area, but we'll get to that later in the show. Um, so, where are you located?
I'm in Heidelberg, beautiful Heidelberg, close to the castle, and it's really hot here too. So I know you struggle.
Yeah, exactly. So, got a jam-packed show today, but before we go into the agenda, I was hoping that you could just introduce yourself a little bit more and tell people like what hobbies you have, something besides because we do so much coding and we talk
Right.
about things that have to do with Developers Digest as well as all of our tech bites and other things. They may not know what your personal hobbies are. So, do you have a personal
hmm
hobby you want to share?
Sure. I have tons of different hobbies, like ranging from rock climbing all over music making. But what I'm focusing on right now the most is building tiny little toys and painting them. I mean, have you heard from like those miniatures called Warhammer?
I have. Yeah, they're very sci-fi or fantasy, right?
Right, they're both sci-fi and fantasy, and I'm reading the books on the sci-fi side and painting the miniatures for the sci-fi side as well. So that's what I'm doing right now, but it's a little bit too warm right now. But
So, like when we're coding, we have to have certain things to make the code work. You have to have certain tools or certain
right.
compilers, or you have to use certain things to make it easier. What
hmm
do you have to be able to paint those things because they're tiny? Like you can't just do it with
Yeah.
regular paintbrush.
I mean, you could taking your comparison to coding. I mean, you can write code in a text editor, right? In the end of the day, and then you're just going to feed it to a compiler. And the same as with painting like miniatures, not only like Warhammer, but also all types of different miniatures. As you can go to like a Best Buy. No, what are the stores called? The Home Depots. You can go to like
Hmm.
a Home Depot and buy some cheap paintbrushes and paint them with them, but then they will look a little bit clunky and it's hard for you. And so it's the same thing with miniature painting. You need basic tools to get a higher quality, a little bit, you know,
Nice.
yeah, different paints and layerings and stuff. Mhm.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
And so I don't want to rush you, but I know we got a jam-packed agenda. So if you could run through the things we're going to see today on the show for the audience, that'd be great.
Yeah, let me dive right in. So today we have a brand new developer news episode we want to show you. Also, from July to this week's Wednesday, August, we had the code challenge for the SAP BTP Kyma Runtime Spotlight Month. Then we had the weather report as always, and then a super cool demo by Jamie Cawley about CAP on Kyma. So really looking forward to that. And then, of course, the trivia question.
Nice. Yeah. So this month's trivia, I'm kind of relating it to the 50th anniversary because SAP
Mhm.
just had a 50th anniversary gala, a big party to celebrate our birthday. And I was thinking, can you think about during the show, just now that we're 50 years old, how many employees does this company have? How many customers do we have? And how many
Mhm.
countries are those customers in? Because that was a highlight that I read pretty quickly when I was
Yeah,
researching. And it's a pretty phenomenal amount of numbers if you see the scale that we are. So I don't know if you have a guess, maybe hold it till the end, but think about it during the show.
it's definitely a great question, Josh. So we'll see.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So what's up first?
Let's dive right into the news segment, I would say.
Okay. Here we go.
Developer News.
Developer News.
Developer News.
SAP Analytics Cloud Release 2216 is available for fast-track customers and for users of trial and guided experience instances. Now, while exporting a package or editing an existing package, you can choose to include or exclude object dependencies. During the first transport, you normally would like to transport objects with all their dependencies. During subsequent transports, you want to transport only delta changes, and this enhancement allows you to include objects, but not their dependencies. As well, this 2216 release includes a new set of features in the optimized story experience. For example, in the optimized view mode, a new active viewport rendering feature only renders objects that are visible on screen, and will pause all objects outside the viewport until the user scrolls to another area of the story. It enables SAP Analytics Cloud to provide information as quickly as possible while enabling the viewer to execute multiple subsequent interactions. Obviously, as a story designer, you can set default rendering experience by yourself.
Welcome back from the news segment. Great news in the SAP world, and I hope all of you check out the news each week on our SAP Developers YouTube channel. What do you think about the news, Josh?
I agree. And I think it was hard to pick a segment from last week because we had so many different topics we covered. So that was a great segment, but be sure to watch all the news. But moving on, I really want to jump into the next segment, and I'm hoping you can set it up for us because we've had these different code challenges this year. And this is the first one I think that you ran. You were in charge of running one on Kyma, like you mentioned. So can you explain what we're about to watch?
Yeah. So we had this SAP Community Spotlight Month for the Kyma runtime, I decided to create a code challenge covering like cloud native basics, focusing more or less on Kubernetes containerization, then of course bringing it to our fairly new runtime, the Kyma runtime, because it ties perfectly in. And the goal was over a span of 4 weeks to complete weekly challenges. And these challenges were structured and built up so the participants start with the basic fundamentals in a cloud native world. You know, what is containerization and what is Kubernetes and how does all of that work? All the way to having a running service on Kyma, being exposed to the outside world over an API, secured and highly scalable. So that was the goal by the end of the challenge. And as far as I can tell, people loved it and they were super successful. So
yeah, no, they had a lot of volume, a lot of views, and a lot of people submitted their own responses in the SAP group section. So very cool. So this is video is going to show a recap of that entire thing.
Correct.
All right, well, let's play the video.
I just wanted to quickly recap the SAP Community Code Challenge, which was about cloud native and the SAP BTP Kyma runtime for the month of July. The challenge spanned over 4 weeks, starting on Wednesday, July 7th, and reached into the first week of August. The goal of the code challenge was to introduce the community to the concepts of Kubernetes. They should dip their toes into the waters of a highly scalable, resilient, self-healing, and powerful container image runtime, which has become the industry standard over the last years. The participants entered weekly changing challenges where they used their local development environment as well as the Kyma runtime to explore the power of Kubernetes and containerized apps. The overview of the overarching challenge, the starter project, and the weekly challenges can be found on GitHub within the SAP Samples organization. Even if the code challenge is finished, you can still visit the repository and try to complete the challenges yourself. But for now, I'm walking you through the challenges week by week. So let's get started. For the first week, the challengers had to take the provided Hello World Node.js application and deploy it to their Kyma runtime cluster. The application was already containerized and provided through the GitHub container registry. So, in general, I wanted to start the challenge easy to give all participants a fun introduction to the topic. As you can see, GitHub requires us to create a so-called secret within our Kubernetes cluster. This is being used to authenticate against the GitHub container registry. Even if the container image is publicly available, GitHub requires us to prove we're registered at github.com. With the secret configured, I can simply deploy the container using the deployment YAML and kubectl or the Kyma dashboard. Now having the prepackaged application up and running on my Kyma cluster, we can head into week 2 challenge. In the week 2, the challengers should create their own service in a programming language of their choice. Can be Golang, Node.js, JavaScript, or any other language they would prefer. It didn't need to be anything fancy because I wanted them to focus on writing up the deployment YAML and containerize their service on their own. They could easily see if they made any mistakes by deploying it to the Kyma runtime, as the runtime would tell you if something is going wrong while starting up the pods with the service. Now that we covered the basics, week 3 got a little bit more complicated. The challengers were required to take their deployed service to the next level by exposing and securing it using API rules on Kyma. I propose using JWT tokens as they are well integrated in the SAP Identity Service and the Kyma runtime. But in the end, almost all modern authentication methods are possible. After securing and exposing the service, we head into week 4. In the final week, the challenge was all about scaling and making the service bulletproof. The challengers should use the horizontal autoscaler feature to make their service highly scalable and resilient for potential high traffic income. As you can see, it is easy to configure this within the Kyma runtime so the underlying Kubernetes cluster starts up additional pods if the currently started ones can't handle the incoming traffic no more. So, after each week, the challengers did submit their results into the SAP community groups so we can test and verify if a challenge is completed. If I scroll through all the submissions, you can see we got quite some submissions here. The overall challenge was a huge success if we look at the feedback and the numbers on GitHub and the SAP community. Overall, we had over 30 submissions, 70 forks, and multiple stars on the repository on GitHub, which shows me a great interest in the topic. So what does that mean for the developer advocates? We'll focus even more on the topic in the future and provide amazing new content so the community can keep learning. But in the meantime, there is the 2-minute of Cloud Native series on the SAP Developers YouTube channel, various tutorials, and a big selection of samples on GitHub. The product teams behind the Kyma runtime are active within the community and create amazing samples and content for all levels of knowledge on the topic. So get excited and check out these resources if you want to proceed in your Kubernetes journey or get started with it.
Welcome back. Thanks for watching that segment. I hope you enjoyed it. And Noah, up to you, Josh. Where are we for the weather?
Actually, we're about to go out into the field. I've got a special location for today's weather report that is very natural. I hope you enjoy it.
Okay, let's check it out.
It is not good, Kevin. It's not good.
Cool. Thanks, Josh, for the brilliant report. And now I would say it's time for that cool interview and demo with Jamie Cawley, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So we're going to play a really great thing that Jamie did for us. He took the new announcement where we're running the cloud application programming model on top of Kyma. So he's actually going to take you through. It's pretty technical, but I think you can follow along. He covers a lot in about 10 minutes, but it's a pretty technical demo that I think really gives people a great idea of how they can set up their own CAP on Kyma system.
Okay, so let's check it out.
Cool. Enjoy.
Hey, everybody. As promised, I'm being joined by Jamie Cawley, who is part of our Kyma adoption team. Jamie has a demo he wants to walk us through. Welcome, Jamie.
How you doing, Josh? Thank you.
Doing well. How you doing?
Good.
So what are you going to show us today?
So recently it was announced that the CAP is now supported for Kyma. So I'm going to give you a quick demo of how you can use CAP to deploy into Kyma.
Yep. And for those who don't know, CAP is SAP's cloud application programming model. And we're talking about now for the first time being able to run that model on top of Kyma. Where did it run before?
It was for Cloud Foundry base. You could run it in Kyma, but now they've made it a little bit easier to do some of the tasks that you would need to do that.
Okay. Excited to see it. If you want to go ahead and share your screen, and then the audience can follow along.
Let me start sharing. And you can see my screen now?
Yep.
So right now I have a Kyma cluster already showing, and you can see VS Code as well too. So this sample that I'm going to walk through is part of our Kyma's sample repository, which I believe you're going to put a link to at the end of the video or in the description of the video. And so I already have that showing here. So you see this CAP service. It has a couple different folders here. An app folder, which contains a CAP database definition and a service definition. I'm not going to cover any UI stuff. And there's a couple other folders here for Docker. We're not going to use Docker today, or this Docker file today. And then a K8 for the Kubernetes /Kyma stuff. and you'll find two READMEs. So the README that we're focused on is this C&B for cloud native build. So what CAP released for support for Kyma was just a single tenant based application, which is what we're going to cover today, and support for a HANA database, support for like a UI application. I'm not going to cover that, but it's similar to what we're going to do here. And then authentication using Access UAA, which I'll cover that. And then you can also do connectivity to the cloud or on-premise systems. I won't cover that today. So I have this application already pulled down from the Git repository. And I'm in the app directory here. So the first thing I would do is just go ahead and install the application. This is a Node application. So that installs, and I'm going to start by adding a couple of the features that are for Kyma. So you can see here I have the package JSON, and there's some stuff that I already have dependencies. So I can run this now if I wanted to, but I'm just going to go ahead and start adding the features. So I'll add HANA, and then I'm going to add Helm. You'll see when I add Helm, it's going to add another folder here. So what that actually does is create a Helm chart based on my application, which I'll come back to this in a little bit because we'll have to set some of the values. So what Helm is just a package manager for Kubernetes. So it allows you to package your application, so all the resources related to your application, into a single Helm chart here, or it could be many Helm charts. And it basically allows you to parameterize your application using templates. And that way it helps you to basically like manage your application and like the versions of it and stuff like that. So edit Helm. So the next thing I want to do is I'll go into this chart now and show it to you. So you can see the values. So the values are, these will get propagated down to all of the pieces of the Helm chart. So you can see, there's, the web application, there's some templates. And so you'll see like deployment. So this is basically all the pieces related to set this CAP application up in Kyma. So I'll start with setting the values of this Helm chart. So I have a couple values that I need. So I need the domain, copy and paste that in here. I have to set these container repository or container registry. I'm going to use mine. As an image pull secret, I'm not going to use that. So just put not used. And I mentioned that we're going to use HANA. So I have a secret already created from HANA. So currently, Kyma, you cannot create an instance of HANA, a service instance within Kyma. So I already went into my BTP account and created that. You can see in this the K8 directory, there's a HANA DB secret. So basically what you do, go through the steps of provisioning a HANA database and then create a HCI instance. And that basically just gives you a secret with the credentials. And you basically just got to copy them in here. I have this sample already set up. So you can copy all those values directly in here and then you would apply it. So I did that already. So I have this, the database secret here. So that has all the data related to connecting to the database. And my application, because I'm putting those values in the Helm chart here, referencing this FAQ DB. So it would basically just read them when it's when it needs access to the database and like setting up the schema and stuff like that. And so I have all these values set. There's one other value I have to change in here. So it's just a port that I'm going to change to my application port. to have them set. So this chart's ready to go. So the next step that I would do is I'm also going to add I'll add security to this, so you can't hit this service without authenticating. So I'll add that feature. And in addition to that, I'm going to set my my service here to require that you're authenticated. So I'm not going to do roles or anything. Just basically just requires that you're authenticated. So you have to get, so it's like do like an OAuth process to get a token. So the service will require that you have a token to access it. And so now what I would do is I'm going to build my application for production. So you see that generates this gen folder that contains my application. And then so I'm not going to use Docker files. I'm going to use this pack command, which is Keto. So this is the cloud native build packs. So they'll just read, basically what they do is they'll read out of my package JSON and determine what kind of image to build based off of the definition in here. What's probably one of the more important things here is that you specify your version of Node that you want it to build. So I want it to be in the 14 range here. And you'll see when it builds, it will read from that file. It goes to 420 because that's what the build pack is using. So this basically creates my Docker container for me without me specifying a Docker file. So right now I'm building the one for the service. And I also have to build one for the database. So there'll be a pod that will actually deploy my database schema to HANA. And it will just run as a job and then it will delete. So I'll build that as well. So after you build the two containers, now what you need to do is go ahead and push them. I'm using Docker registry, so I'm going to push them to Docker. So I'll push the service, and then I'll push the DB deployer, and that's the letter. And now, so I have all the components ready. So now I can use Helm to go ahead and deploy my application. You could see, I'll show you beforehand. So we don't have any pods set up. So I'll go ahead and run the command to deploy the application. You can see that it's installing it. You see we get these two pods showing up. So this DB deployer will go ahead and let's see if we can see the logs real quick. So this will, as it says, the HANA deployer will deploy the schema to the database. You may have already did it. Yep. And then we have the service application. So I can look at the logs here. You can see that it reads it basically reads the HANA database properties to connect to it. So you see them in the logs, and you can see that it's starting the services and that it's ready. So this, in addition to the pods, this also creates an API rule to access the application. And you can see now if I try to access the application, I get a 401 because I have not authenticated to it. So we'll also see that in the, from the Helm chart, we'll return the service endpoint. So I could try curl to call this the service itself. So this admin FAQs, and I got 401 from that. So what I need to do now is to authenticate to access UAA. So you'll see within Kyma that it created a service for Access UAA for this application. And if I go into the binding and the secret, I can use these values. I'm going to decode these. And basically what I'm going to do is set these to some environment variables. So give me one. And basically, once I have them set, I can call this URL to get an OAuth token. So I have some commands that will do that for me. So I'm just going to paste them in. Let me put this up front. I'll paste them in. So I'm going to reference this secret and get the URL, the client ID, and the client secret. And so I set them. And now I can do the same thing with basically using those values to get an access token. I have a command that's going to basically set that to a parameter as well. And now once I have that access token, I can put that in the header and call that same API that admin FAQs. And now I get the content back from the service. And that concludes the demo.
Very nice. So one question, what would you say CAP is doing for those who aren't familiar with running CAP? Like there's some services and things that have been abbreviated, or there are packages of code that CAP is bringing that the user otherwise would have had to find on their own to connect to an SAP system. Like what about CAP on Kyma makes this special?
So CAP itself is allowing you to define a schema for a database, and then it sets up the database based on the schema that you provide. And then using the schema too, you can then define a service. And I mentioned earlier, you can also have a UI, like a Fiori UI that's related as well. So it allows you to create all those pieces together. You can run it locally inside of VS Code to help your development, and you can mock the application locally if needed as well. And then using the Helm pieces, we are allowed, basically allows us to package that in an easy fashion, which then we can then deploy that application to Kyma.
Nice, beautiful. Thank you very much. As you said, I'll put the link to the GitHub repository, the SAP samples, in the bottom of this video, so people can click on that and they can actually download their own copy of it and start playing with it.
Okay, thanks, Josh.
Thank you, Jamie. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Super cool stuff by Jamie, as always. And I love seeing how we're trying to get our code together with open source. And it perfectly ties into the code challenge we had this month as well. And you know what? For Devtoberfest, I got Jamie to give us a super cool session on the topic of CAP on Kyma as well. So you can look forward to that.
Nice. I mean, we're basically stealing our own surprise that Devtoberfest has all this great content, and we're letting people know a little ahead of time that one of the featured topics is going to be Kyma. So that's pretty cool.
But the thing is it really a surprise that Devtoberfest is an awesome event? Because we all know that. You know what? Let's change back to trivia, Josh.
Trivia.
Yeah. So look, I hope you've been thinking about this the whole show. You should know the first part of this. How many employees do we have?
So we should have around 100,000 employees worldwide. And
Correct.
I know that over 70% of the worldwide money transactions go through an SAP system somewhere. So the numbers on the countries and the customers should be super high, but I'm not sure about that. Could you enlighten me?
Yeah. Look, it's very high. If you think about how we started out with, 50 years ago with SAP code, and we moved into then ABAP, which exploded to this huge code base. We're now running with ABAP and HANA and all of our other systems, Ariba, Concur. We have over 460,000 customers across 140 countries.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
you know what?
A lot of code out there. A lot of code.
It's true. And speaking of ABAP, coming up in the next couple of months, we have a new code challenge coming up and a new community spotlight month. And this is all about our most favorite topic, drum roll, ABAP. So make sure you check that out and keep watching our tweets and so on to be up to date for that.
Cool. Thank you very much. And speaking of thank yous, thank you, Kevin, for hosting this with me. Really, It was a great show, great experience being with you, and I hope to see you in person soon, maybe on location somewhere to film.
Hope so. Always love working with you, Josh. See you next time.
Thanks, Kevin. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I am here with Kevin.